Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast. In today's episode, we will be continuing with our exploration of Franz Bardon's Initiation into Hermetics, Step 9. So, there's a lot of fun stuff in this step. The first portion is on the neutralization of the elements. So, this is quite important, and it was touched upon briefly, I believe in step 7, in relation to using drugs to induce clairvoyant experience and spiritual experiences. So this takes that a little bit further. Now, as always, we break it into the 4 elements. So in terms of the fire element, right, he calls this the immobilization of the fire principle. Right, or creating a type of dysfunction in the fire principle. Okay, so in this group belong all experiments of clairvoyance which are undertaken by gazing at an object, such as crystal gazing, gazing or focusing on a dot or a point, gazing on shiny surfaces such as black ink, black coffee, a mirror, and so on. You could include in this a lot of the work that Carlos Castaneda did with creating these eye exercises around the sun, looking at flames, etc. Okay, so these are all ways in which you force a type of clairvoyant experience. There's different types of eye exercises you can do that will strain the eyes. And yes, there is a type of resilient development in the sensory system, the same way you develop resilience through the musculoskeletal system, lifting weights, the same way you develop resilience astrally when you're working with the astral fluid and the elements from that perspective. There is a development here, but these are all exercises that can create a forced break. Okay, so what is a forced break? A forced type of wearing down of the matrices. Okay, a forced separation, not fully of course, but a forced softening of the matrices that is done outside of the context of equanimity. And this is the really important part. Something that is done outside of the context of equanimity, an exercise that is outside of equanimity. So this has a goal, which is to force clairvoyant function, but it's not done in an equanimous way. So how do we work in an equanimous way? Well, this is done through balancing of the elements and the harmonious effort. Okay, all of these forced things are in a way similar to taking drugs, in that while you are choosing to take the drug or you are choosing to do the exercise, it is reliant on the external of the exercise to force a type of internal reaction, as opposed to working from inside, from a space of equanimity, and allowing that particular function of, say, clairvoyance or whatever the heightened spirit sense is that information's coming through, to function harmoniously and naturally. Okay, so the next one is the immobilization of the air principle. So I'll read this because it's just a sentence or two. In this group belong all experiments of clairvoyance, and when he says clairvoyance, you can include the spiritual experience through any of the sense gates, which are undertaken by burning and thereby creating fumes or smoke, such as the burning of incense, inhalation of narcotic fumes, vapors, gases, and so on. Okay, so here's the thing, is let's say you're burning incense. There are incense which have a very strong relationship to spiritual processes. You can load incense with energy to release them when they're burned, to release the energy when it's burned, or that intention. There's a lot of work that can be done with incense. Okay, but if we are using the fumes once again to weaken or soften the matrices, then once again we are not choosing from an internal equanimous space the entrance into the space that we are moving. We are relying on the substance, and as such, it's like falling down the stairs to get to the bottom instead of walking down the stairs to get to the bottom. You don't really have much agency or sovereignty during the experience. You give up your sovereignty to the incense. Now, this could also be sniffing glue, right? That'll give you a type of experience. So is there smells that are very good for you? Yes. Are there smells that can be productive for spiritual processes and energetic processes? Yes. However, we want to be very aware of how we are achieving or having spiritual experiences, right? Of the subtle sense variety, of the clair sense variety. Okay? So, the next one, immobilization of the water principle. The immobilization of the water principle is brought about through experiments such as taking narcotics, alkaloid substances like opium, hashish, soma, peyote, mescaline, which enter the bloodstream via the digestive process. So the air principle, those enter the bloodstream via the lungs, and for the water principle, it enters the bloodstream through the digestion. So you can include ayahuasca in there, you could include mushrooms and all kinds of things into this water element. So, are there things you can consume which are helpful? Yes. However, if you're consuming these types of substances to have spiritual experience, once again, how is it that you're having that experience? You are weakening the mental astral matrix, right? You are weakening the substance that binds the mind into the energy of the astral body and through that into the vital and physical. Okay, so through weakening that, yes, you are essentially weakening your protective tree, your integration, your alignment, which opens you. When you are open to the potential to see things that you couldn't see because the mind's identity is no longer stuck within the emotional frameworks that have existed or within the physical, so you can make very potent changes. You can also have incredible clairvoyant experiences, clairaudient experiences, etc., etc. However, the theme here is, once again, you are not choosing through your spiritual skill to open. You are forcing yourself open. Okay, so we got to be really careful with this forcing ourselves open. There is, what I've noticed at least, deep within, there's a type of dissolution of respect for this entire entity that occurs when we are forcing the process like this. Not to say that you can't have positive overall experiences through using this stuff, but you certainly don't want to rely on it for your spiritual experiences. So beware of that. The last one, which is probably going to be the most difficult to palate for many of us, is physical practices. Okay, so we'll read through this one. In this group belong all practices that cause a split consciousness or a shift of consciousness. For example, dancing, swaying the upper body, rotating one's head, spelling of letters in the feet, and so on. This also includes all involuntary and pathological visions of the mentally ill. Furthermore, all pathological cases that are triggered by fright, terror, anger, exhaustion also belong to this group. So, this is most physical rituals. All right? This would include things like a sweat lodge, things like a sun dance, things like spinning in circles that you see, where people will spin for, I guess, hours and hours, right? There's, so it mentions swaying, rotating. There are exercises that many traditions do that are designed as a sledgehammer to blast away your protection, to blast you open, right? Now, the theme, again, is you are forcing a break. You are forcing open and forcing essentially your integration and protection to subside. So, can you have spiritual experiences? Yes. Can you discover more about yourself? Can you see aspects of yourself that you couldn't see before? Yes. Why? Because you have softened the matrices through the practice. Now, have you done that through an internal equanimous state? No. What we have done in this scenario is, again, we have forced open those doors. Okay? So there is no agency there. There is no sovereignty there. If you force open the doors through any method, that means that you somehow have to find a way to force the doors closed. What makes us think that we can force the door open and then somehow have the skill to very skillfully and choicefully close the doors and reintegrate and center very naturally? I don't know. But one of the things that we try to do if someone has done a lot of forcing open type of experiences through any of the element frameworks that we just used is physical exercise, right? Sharper movement, stuff that works on your balance, heavy weights as well. Anything that will take the mind, which has been forced open, the matrices that have been forced open, and now the consciousness is no longer locked into the framework of the body. It's gone, and we have to find a way to force it back. So are there ways to do this? Yes. However, we can avoid the need for this by taking our time and using the internal skill to feel into those matrices, feel into those protective membranes, those integrations, soften them open through meditative skill, through spiritual skill and development, okay? And all of the same experiences, and not just the clair experiences, not just the clairvoyance and the spiritual experiences, but all of the development and softening away of the identity and being able to see and change and evolve and free ourselves. All of that stuff can occur, including the opening and potential to touch into more and more refined alchemical states. All of this stuff can occur in the absence of the force methods, in the absence of imposing an opening on the systems that are at play. Okay, now, one of the things is that often the experience will seem hugely potent if you're using a forceful method, because it is taking you from here and you are seeing things from here. So, oh my God, crazy, incredible, progress, want to do it again, all this stuff. Now, let's say you have, those are our benchmarks, right? Let's say, once again, you're starting from here. You have a daily practice. Maybe you do retreats as well for days on end or weeks on end. And you, of course, during a retreat, you will get this same type of big differential in what you experience and where you were fairly quickly, right? Not necessarily as fast as forcing the door open, but it will happen. And then you have this experience with the retreat come down, or from the forceful expression, the come down from those forceful experiences, where you experience the world, yourself, the light, all of this stuff from here. And then suddenly, your perspective can stay up here, but the skill, the ability to touch it, because it was forced open, drops down, and now you're at a place where you're looking up here from down here, and you're going, oh, this sucks compared to this. That's a very common experience, not only with the forceful method, but also with retreats. So that was one thing that took me a little time to learn, was that if I do a retreat, it's a similar sledgehammer type of experience. Now it's done from a different standpoint. So it's done with agency, it's done with sovereignty, but it's gonna take you deep fast, right? And so you might not be able to sustain a practice that will keep you in that peak state all the time. So you have to be okay with things falling off a bit, and then through daily practice, what once was the end of a retreat skill level becomes your daily skill level. And I find, within a year, it's almost always within a year that your daily skill will match where you were at the end of a retreat, if not sooner. One I don't know if it's a mistake, but one thing that I tried to do for a long time was to sustain that. Whatever I got to, I wanted to sustain it, which meant, let's say it was 16 hours a day of meditative activity, or non-activity, or whatever you want to call it, for the retreat. Post the retreat, what was how much did I have to do to sustain that? And so that's where I found, it's 6+ hours a day was about what I had to do to sustain that. Okay, and then every little retreat opportunity that I had, whether it was a few days at a long weekend or whatever, would just bump it up more. But, that can be unsustainable if you also have a bunch of other stuff that you need to do. So you have to look at your lifestyle, how much time that you have, how much energy you have, what you can devote. Because when you're in a retreat setting, there's no distractions which are siphoning off your energy. There's nothing that you have to think about or deal with other than the processes that you're working through from the alchemical standpoint. So because of that, all of that energy can just, everything just focuses in, and bang, you're off. So point being, we have to be aware of these come downs. Okay, now we have here and we have here. The forced equivalent to, say, that 6 to 8+ hours a day that it might take to sustain the end of a retreat type of skill set would be suddenly, from a drug standpoint, now you have to take those drugs all the time. And then you become less sensitive to it. So you have to take more drugs and more drugs and more drugs and more drugs, because you develop a bit of a resilience to it. And that's a really potentially disastrous way to have any type of long-term, healthy, harmonious spiritual progression. So let's say, included in whatever retreats you might do, you have a daily practice. Say a good couple hours a day is sort of a baseline to aim for. Okay, this is, 2 hours a day. I found 4 hours a day was where things, you can really start to ratchet up the progression. Okay, now let's say you have a couple hours a day, you're practicing, you are touching into some refined states. Every day, maybe you start here, but every day you go a little bit. Now the differential there is very minimal. Okay, but it's growing. Now, because that differential is minimal, we won't have such a novel relationship with the spiritual experience. The novel nature of it is what makes it appear so majestically spiritual and interesting. And that is, and shiny and glittery and all this stuff. And that is where you get a lot of the spiritual folks who take drugs, who also practice, talking about their relationships with God specifically, with divinity specifically. And a big part of that is these big fluctuations. So through a daily type of approach, well, we don't get these huge differences. We are still growing and evolving, right? We're still touching into these potentials to the point where, this is important, to the point where the novelty, even though the novelty is not there, the skill is there. The potential for experience is there. Because those are there and it's not novel, we don't really notice them often. We don't think of it as special. It's almost mundane because it's just part of how you see the world. When something is new, when something is novel, when the difference in awareness is so big, of course it's this crazy powerful experience. So then you give the experience over to how you got there. Maybe it's the drugs. Maybe it's a super intense retreat. Now, the retreat isn't exactly the same as the drugs by any means whatsoever, but it is something to note, to be aware of, that you can have those come downs. So let's say it's a retreat type of scenario. You hand that over to the retreat and you go, well, I guess I need more of these. Just like I guess I need more drugs. We want to try to stay at that big differential of novelty, because if you talk to anybody who's finished a retreat, how was your retreat? The sky opens and all the amazing stuff of the retreat comes out. And so we want to have that peak differential again. Okay, so peak differentials are novel, they're fun. However, the foundation, cultivating that foundation and that slowly growing, it siphons off some of the novelty, but you still have the same skill. Now, because it's not novel, because it's not special, it's often not noticed, right? It's just a part of how you live. It's just a part of how you experience the world, okay? So these are things that we want to be aware of. Now, especially, I mean, these days, there's a lot of people engaging in the drug side of this opening capacity. We need to remember that that's one of the biggest functions that's occurring is this opening. Now, sometimes there is intelligence within that is working its way through. That the opening opens us and we can touch higher stuff. That's not necessarily everyone that's going through that though. So we need to be able to reintegrate, to find our grounding, our solidity, our stability, to return the mind, the consciousness, and really reintegrate it with the astral bodies, with the emotions, with the physiology, with the vitality, the physical body. All this stuff needs to come together, come back together. And it all needs to ideally grow together, right? If it's all growing together, little at a time, we won't have those big, oh my God type of moments as much, but there is a depth to the practice that arises, a depth to what is seen and what is experienced. When it's a novel experience, it's all shiny and glittery, and there can be value in that. It can serve as motivation for us to continue. It can offer us insight. Okay, but when, I'm sure we've all experienced this, when you hear someone, maybe they've just done their first meditation retreat, blah, 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 so amazing. This is where you get the type of individual who's going to do something new And anyone that they speak to, this type of person is going to just talk your ear off about why that is the salve to the entire world and how everyone should do this because this will be amazing for everybody, etc. Blah, 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 blah. Right? We've all experienced that. So we need to be aware of that. We need to be aware of those tendencies. Why are we talking about this crazy, amazing thing? Boom. Differential in awareness and experience. Right? Little at a time. Okay? Maybe you can go to the gym and you can, on your first try, deadlift 300 pounds, without too much training or whatever. Maybe you're relatively fit, but you're going to burn out the nervous system. You're going to burn out the endocrine system. You're gonna burn out, rip tissue, whatever is going to happen, right? You might be able to do a thing, but you haven't built up a body that's capable of doing it. Now, because this is spiritual activity, it's not only the body that needs to be capable. The astral body needs to be developed and capable. We need to have harmony and balance, equilibrium. So working with the elements. That has to be done physically. It has to be done astrally. It has to be done mentally, working through the mental functions, right, in relation to equanimity. Okay, through that, we will then be able to integrate, close the doors, have everything unify and come together, and open, so that we can invite higher alchemical energy, states, and intelligence to rush through us, right? Invite that stuff to move through us. And then we can integrate with something beyond ourselves, which will cause all types of evolution. Okay, so I hope you found this helpful. This can be one that a lot of people do not like because we get very attached to the things which bring us these peak novel experiences. Okay, maybe you've done, a specific type of mirror work, and I mean, hell, the whole next section in this step is mirror work. So it's kind of funny. Maybe you've done some type of visual experience work and you've had great success with it. Maybe you have done some type of inhalations or vapors that you're smoking, or some types of drugs, or ayahuasca or peyote or something. Maybe you've done all kinds of these experiences, these types of exercises, and you've had good success with them. Okay, that doesn't mean that they don't serve a function, right? To open the door when we're really stuck, when we really can't do it. It's not to rob anyone of the value that you may have had in those experiences. However, everything is just the thing to the next thing. This is a lesson that the man who got me into meditation way back in the day shared with me. It's just the thing to the thing. And that thing is just the thing to the next thing. Everything is just the thing to the thing. So you've done these exercises, the swaying, whatever it might be, the spinning, the sweat lodges, whatever it might be. I mean, the heat, of course, like physical duress, once you can't close against it anymore, you have to open. That's the only way to get through it. So positive potentials, absolutely, right? But we need to develop agency in the spiritual path. We cannot be reliant on exercises, reliant on drugs of any kind, reliant on particular sense gate, like fraying of the sense gates through overworking them and that type of stuff to try to force open these experiences. Equanimity. This will give you a very, very refined, over time, a very refined and sovereign doorway to the emptiness the akasha beneath the body, the akasha beneath the vitality of the vital forces, the akasha, the emptiness beneath the astral body, the akasha, the emptiness through the mental attributes as well, right? This gives you doorway after doorway after doorway of choiceful opening, choiceful equanimity, equilibrium, emptiness, unification, and sovereignty. Okay, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, drop a comment. If you're interested in training, I have a spiritual attunement retreat coming up in June here, 2025, British Columbia, Canada. So that will be 16 days of some pretty intense transmission and training. So if you're interested, come on out to that. Details are on the website. Also, there are courses on the website in Tai Chi and Hermetic Alchemy, Meditation, Qigong. There is a Zen Den, which is a Q&A reference library on the website. Any questions you might have on the materials or anything else, you can shoot me a note and I'll throw up a video response for you as soon as I'm able. And lastly, if you're interested in private coaching, I offer private lessons online as well via video calls. All right, thank you for your time. Have fun, practice, bye. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast. We'll be continuing with our exploration of Step 9, Franz Bardon's initiation into Hermetics. This particular section of Step 9 looks at the magic mirror. So there's a number of purposes that a use of the tool of a mirror can serve. However, it's important always to remember that the tool is merely that, right? No matter how advanced the hammer is, there's the person doing the hammering. There's the skill behind it. There's the capability and the cultivation behind the tool. So everything that you do using a mirror can be done without. And that's a really, really important distinction to make. So how you go about moving away from the mirror, there's a number of different ways you can do that. The purpose of this is to discuss using the mirror. So let's look at the values in using the mirror itself. Firstly, what it does is it can create a type of a safety mechanism because in a sense it distances the practicer from what they're doing. So it creates a type of separation. Okay, and there can be some value in this in that you develop a subconscious habit of separating yourself from the ritual after. You do the ritual or the meditation in the mirror, using the mirror, and then you finish it and it consolidates in and around the mirror, all the energy of that practice, and then you go your separate ways. So because that becomes a subconscious habit, it can make it easier for us to practice without having these crossovers where you keep the practice open, where you keep the energy open, and because you might not be fully absorbed and focused when you're not engaged in specific practice, you won't have to deal with any of the potential negative ramifications, or far less. That said, if you like to keep stuff open, have fun. So, the use of the mirror as a tool, what can it be used for? Before we get into that, let's look at the ways in which you might load the mirror. So there's two ways, for the most part, right, that Bardon looks at. And those are where you invite the energy you're going to bring into the mirror from the universe, or where you bring it from the universe through yourself into the mirror. One goes through you, one bypasses you and goes directly into the mirror. If you're going to do work with yourself, then there's always the potential that you go through yourself into the mirror. And if you're going to be working on others, you don't go through yourself, and instead you go straight from the universe into the mirror. Now, most people will tend to bridge these a little bit. It's very difficult to actually make that separation because many of us will use ourselves, our physical, tangible perceptions, as feedback, right? As a feedback mechanism that lets us know that we're running the energy and that it's flowing through. And there is certainly some value in this. However, there is a stage where the more you can step back from needing to use your own body as a barometer, the easier that flow will be. Often the use of the body as a barometer for the expression of energy can create a stagnation, right? Will create an internal barrier so that we can feel the energy more strongly, right? It is resistance that allows us to have the perception of strength. So this means that as we move away from passing the energy through ourselves, we might not feel our own resistance to the energy, and it might not feel very strong at all. So this means our mechanisms of feedback, or our expressions of success in what we're doing, might not be reflected through such an obvious, coarse representative as the body. So this is why we need to develop a strong relationship to more subtle frames of reference, to more subtle forms of energy than just the body's reflection of the frequency. Okay, so developing your awareness of energy and more refined understandings of that awareness of energy is definitely a high value part of the practice, right? This allows us to look at, well, how is this frequency that we're working with expressing itself and coming into manifestation through the world? Of course, you have the coarse, like we just mentioned, the coarse nature of the physical body. There might be stuff that starts to happen in the astral field around you, and this can be a very complex topic, so we'll just keep it somewhat simple in using the emotional reference to the astral body, okay, the astral energies and frequencies. Then you would have, of course, the manifestation on the mental plane and the frequencies of mind, and then how that extends and how this shows up starts to become a little bit less obvious in the sense of super physical tangibility. It becomes apparent in the types of people you might meet, in the types of knowledge you find yourself encountering, what crosses your path. So there's these synchronicities that start to unfold in more and more subtle realms of expression. If we lock into and just clamp our jaw into one mechanism or one density of feedback that allows us a perception of success, well, then we are missing out on everything that is not that one thing. Okay, so these are just a few very, very clunky examples, but this is all very, very refined as you go on and on and on, okay? So, that said, a mirror can be used very similarly to an amulet or a talisman in the sense that you load the mirror with the energy you want to work with. Okay, so what Bardon mentions, because it's an initiation text, so the main energies you're working with are vital, right, are astral, and he breaks that, of course, into earth, water, fire, and air, the akasha, and light. So vital, earth, water, fire, air, akasha, and light. These are the 7 substances, right? The 4 elements being to the astral typically the way he would work it. So 7 is a lot more than 1, okay, but it's also a lot less than infinity. So you start somewhere, and for many of us, just becoming familiar and comfortable with these gradations can take some time, because there's these differences in feeling quality and perceptual quality, and then there's this whole spectrum of moving beyond the physical body's reflection of the energy, because for a very long time we tend to relate to the energy. We understand it, we perceive it as our perceptions of it, and all perceptions are merely points of resistance to the thing, right, to the energy itself. Example being, even in the visible spectrum of light, you look at a tree, you see the green color coming back at you, right? What's coming back at you is everything that was not absorbed through that substance. It's the light that's being reflected back. It is the resistance of that substance to the light that has created that reflection and that observation, that perception of the color. And this seems to be true in all of the sensory sense gates and how we perceive, okay? So, vital, earth, water, air, fire, akasha, light. The 7 main frequencies that you use in initiation into Hermetics. So now, of course, we are talking about the magic mirror, so how might you use it? Bardon gives a number of examples here. And again, these are just beginning examples. These are just finger. Oh, hey, you could go in this direction. There's a lot of paths you can take in that direction. Okay? So, I'm just going to read through a quick list here. One of the first example is you can use the mirror in any case which requires optical exercises, right, where you make use of your imagination. So you can use the mirror as a means of outsourcing, once again separating yourself from the internal processes, and this can serve some very interesting functions, right, because you end up allowing your perceptions to exist. This is wacky, but like outside of your own habitual egoistic references of your normal self. Okay, so that can be used as a tool in that way. Whenever you are, number 2, any instance when you're loading or charging fluids, energies, or powers, etc. So you can do that once again into the mirror. A gateway to planes, spheres, etc. that you might want to visit. Again, you have this separation. This is the key thing with the mirror, so it seems, is that it allows a sense of separation from the task at hand. And the value and safety in that can be very strong. Okay, as a means of communication with essentially like FaceTime, right? Old school FaceTime with living or departed humans here, as what it mentions. So the easiest way to work that one in terms of getting success would be with a friend who is also on the path, who also has decent skills, and then you can, of course, engage in the meditation and experience, and then afterwards hop on a call and talk about what you experienced, see where the crossovers are and what kinds of success you might have had there. All right, as a means of making contact with forces and entities, so basic evocation or invocation type of work. As a means of an instrument of emanation to impregnate rooms or treat the sick. So many amulets, fountains, wells, etc. can be used in this way as well. People will use water is very common for this type of purpose too. So like an amulet, you would charge the mirror up, and then it would reflect or radiate or emanate the energy that you want it to. So let's say you have a healing practice, you load that mirror with harmony, equanimity, balance in electric and magnetic forces, etc., etc., everything with the full depths of your understanding of where health can come from, or backing support for health, and you load all this light and energy, goodwill into the mirror, and then it would reflect out from the space that you work in. So that's pretty valuable because it can take some of the onus off you to always be in that space. Let's say, again, you have a healing practice every day before you start your work. You load the mirror, or you load an amulet, you load the room. If you're loading a mirror, it will reflect out and impregnate the room, empower the room with that energy, so that you don't have to always be in the depths of that space that you're working with. And there is, once again, value in that it can allow for some small degradation in your focus, your ability to sustain the full alignment with what you're doing. When you do laps, there is this potential there to sustain the energy and sustain the intention. Okay? So, the next one here is to influence yourself or others. That would be quite obvious. Transmitter and receiver, communication, any dimension, any spectrum that you're working with, any realm would be in there. Okay? Defense, an instrument of defense, warding off harmful, undesirable influences. So this would be, you could also look at this as an instrument of alchemy, of a transmutation and transformation of energies that might be coming in. And of course, wards and protective types of energetic expression. And there's a number of different ways you can work that as well. Okay, only a couple more here. An instrument of projection. Okay, so anything that you are wanting to, say, manifest in your life, you could use the mirror as a means of seeing that, envisioning that, and then allowing the reflection of that to sort of inundate your subconscious through the use of the mirror. Okay, that would be the same as the first one, sort of a sensory exercise that's using the mirror. Okay, a lot of these are just repeats. The last one is as a means to explore past, present, and future. So, once again, there you have just some basics. Okay, the mirror is just a tool. All of the energetic substance that you play with from a meditative day-to-day scenario, everything you're working on can be done in the absence of the mirror. But it does serve a nice purpose of separating you from the practice, which could be the exact opposite of what you want. And if you are not using a tool that allows for or is encouraging of a subconscious separation, it can be of a lot of value to really, really consider how you enter a practice, how you introduce yourself to the practice and open a space, and then how you close it after. Okay, so there's value in really taking that into consideration. Many of us, as we progress on the path, we are often always in a degree of practice and meditation and connection and unification and surrender and all this stuff, in resonance with different frequencies and etc., etc. And because it becomes a part of your day-to-day experience, when we go to do a specific practice where you're, okay, I'm going to sit down and go real deep, often we don't really consider opening it as much as we might have in the beginning, or closing it as much as we might have in the beginning. So please explore that, because there can be a lot of really good things in that opening and closing, which doesn't mean that when you close or when you aren't in that specific practice that you are in any way performing the practice of the meditation to a lesser degree, right? Your day-to-day experience and the way this stuff fuses into your moment-by-moment interactions with life, this is all constantly elevating. okay? But still very, very valuable to specific practice. Boom. Open it with intention, open it with a sense of sacredness, close it with a sense of sacredness and through flow. Okay? So, each of these examples that Bardon gives with the use of the magic mirror, they all start to cross over a little bit. Okay? And I find that the first portion, which is to load each individual substance into the mirror, there's a lot of value in that. Right? So build up a bunch of vital energy and spend time loading it into the mirror with the type of intention you might want. Okay, allowing that light of that vital energy to reflect the energy and that information back out at you or into the room. Okay, load it, and maybe you spend, I mean, this is an interesting one, maybe you spend a month really loading, every day the same thing into the mirror, and you set aside an hour to do that. You'll start to build some really interesting stuff, right? You'll really start to notice it. Maybe you load it with Akasha every day. Maybe you load it with the fire element every day, or the water element, etc., etc. And you'll start to get a handle on what's happening. Okay, the other option is you load it, you use it for the practice, and let's say you want to use it for something else. Now you have to dissolve what you loaded into the mirror, or out of the mirror. And so that is why if you're going to use the mirror for the same thing, you can load it every day with the same spectrum of what you're working with and the same energetic substrate, and then that quality, that information that you're working with, that energy will all start to build and build and build and accumulate on itself and spin through itself. Okay? So I found that a lot of the stuff you look at in evocation as well, some of the most valuable ones, of course, the initial loading, because it lets you understand how to build a substance. And did I take my bookmark out? Nope. My favorite one would be the mirror as a gateway to all desired planes, because this works a lot with the evocation. All of the planetary, spheric magic, constellational magic, and everything, the Earth as well, everything that has to do with invo and evocation. This is a really, really interesting tool for that. So what he suggests, we'll just go through this one because it's a nice one, is load the mirror with the Akasha, right? With the Akasha, and you can absorb it into the body, right? From the universe through pore breathing, and then out of your body into the mirror. Okay, now you can do this a billion different ways. He mentions two, through the hands or through the solar plexus. He likes those two. The hands are a really obvious expression, a transmitter of energy. The solar plexus a little bit less obvious, but once you get used to using that, it's fairly easy. And then anything goes once you develop enough familiarity and skill with the energy and how you use mind and body to work with this stuff, okay? So you load it with Akasha, and then from there you step through the mirror. There's a bunch of step-by-step ways of working this, but you load it with Akasha. It's timeless and spaceless. You load yourself, or you essentially separate the mental body, right? It steps through the Akasha, and there you go. And then you're off to the races. Through the Akasha, this gives you the potential to work through the astral planes, or to really go anywhere, to enter anywhere. So this is such a very, very valuable one. The use of the mirror can dissipate some of the potential health hazards of working with the Akasha, because once again, you're not loading yourself so much with a bunch of the Akasha. It's passed through you into the mirror. You separate the mental body or the spirit, if you're using that to refer to the mental body, and there you go, off through the mirror. Okay? When you aren't using the mirror, you have to be a little more cognizant of closing the practice, as we already mentioned. So this is a really fun one, because then you can start using the Akasha and the mirror to get a whole spiritual milieu of through flow. When you start moving beyond the astral planes to higher vibrational spheres, and you start connecting with higher consciousness and entity, and light starts to pour through, and the mental body becomes changed, it becomes inundated. That spirit that has passed through the mirror comes into resonance with higher frequency. It passes back through the mirror at the end and enters you, and facilitates the potential unification with that higher resonance through the astral and through the physical bodies. So there's, of course, again, ways of doing this, many without the mirror, but the mirror offers that nice separation. Okay? So you can go through this, you can look through all the different variations of exercises and come up with your own. These are just initial suggestions. I don't typically use the mirror. I work through some other means. You might really enjoy the use of the mirror, though. You can set a space aside, it's a little darker, and you can really make a nice practice out of it. Okay? So the main thing, if we're going to review the use of the magic mirror, use of the mirror as a spiritual tool, is that it separates the practicer from the practice. And then the residual effects of the practice can come back in through the closing out of the ceremony, okay, in a very balanced and harmonized way. And I find that this is the biggest value of the mirror, is that it allows for sacredness of practice, moving away back to your day-to-day experience. Okay, so that's just a brief introduction to the use of the magic mirror with Franz Bardon's book here. If you're interested in training Hermetic alchemy with me, I have a retreat coming up, a 16-day spiritual attunement retreat, June 2025. There's also courses available on the website in both Tai Chi as well as Qigong, Hermetic alchemy, and meditation. Those are two separate courses. There is a Q&A reference library that comes with both courses, so any questions you might have on the material, you just shoot an email and I'll throw up a video response for you as soon as I'm able. And lastly, private coaching. I offer online private lessons and private coaching. Those are 2-hour sessions. If you are interested in that, please shoot me a note as well. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for your time. Practice. Bye. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast. We'll be continuing with our exploration of Franz Bardon's initiation into Hermetics, Step 9, and we're looking a little bit today at healing. So during the course of this particular initiation, and many initiations out there, we are often introduced to a number of frequencies or a number of spectrums, wavelengths, climbing our way up the vibrational scale. So we've looked at in this course so far vital energy, life force. We've looked at astral energy. We've looked at the 4 elements. We've looked at the 4 elements in relation to the astral and the mental. we've looked at the Akasha principle, and we've looked at light. And we have looked at the qualities of light that we can work into the mental, into the astral, and into the physical bodies. So, when it comes to using all of this stuff for healing, there's a number of ways we can go about that. So Bardon offers a number of options just as entry points for people to begin exploring this. Now, before we even touch the topic of healing itself, we need to look at the mechanisms that exist behind healing, or behind the one doing the healing. Okay, this is really, really vitally important. If we are doing any healing work, we need to be 100% certain that our ego is out of the picture. Okay, now this can express itself in a number of different ways. When it's in the picture, that is, it will express in a number of different ways. I receive notes from time to time from people who are wanting to learn how to heal and develop skills and access to energy, frequency, etc., the elements to heal a loved one. And this is very common. As someone that we care about deeply is very unwell, and we want to be able to heal them, to help them. Now, when I do receive these emails, the typical response is not what is expected initially, though from the feedback I've gotten from these people, it's been quite helpful, which is before you go about even beginning to attempt to try healing on loved ones or people you care about, we need to sort ourselves out. So what does that mean and why? Well, if it is somebody that you care for deeply who is ill, typically we are infested with a lot of worry, a lot of attachment, contraction, these anxieties, etc., that are really tied into our own relationship to this person, our own view of their health, what their health would mean to me, and it becomes very self-centered. Even though it is to help another person, it is so often to help them for me, right? So it's very similar to when somebody that's close to you passes away, and you end up looking at over time, oh, well, what were the aspects of that living person that the living person allowed to flourish in me? So then it's not so much a grief very often of the person who's departed, but a grief of the aspect of yourself that person helped bring into existence. And so we have to look at this in relation to healing. Why is it that we want somebody to get better? And what are the dark tendencies with which we will perceive that person in relation to the healing? And by dark tendencies, I'm referring to the selfishness involved, the clinging, the attachment, the imposition. This is all a part of the process. So many healers, shamans, spiritual workers won't work on their direct family, won't work on those closest to them because of this. Now, so often this isn't really specified in a clear way in the mindset of these folks, the ones I've encountered and spoken with. It's just sort of a rule that gets put into the mix. But if we understand why that rule might be thrown into the mix, this can help us to eventually navigate beyond it. And the only way to do this is to evolve beyond those habits, those particular styles of clinging and attachment that we have for those closest to us. So really, really important that we sort that out. Because what exists in the subconscious, what exists beneath the surface, will always be a part of the healing that occurs. Okay? Now, when you have, so that's for family members, etc. Now, when you have people who are healers as their work, very often there is a lot of pride involved, or there's a martyrdom involved. There's different subsets of different, what we might call like, pathologies of the mind or of the identity, which will infiltrate into the healing. So if you need to heal people because that is how you ascertain your value from the community and from yourself, then that's some clinging, that's some of your own identity that is getting involved in this healing. If your identity is that of a healer and that is how you perceive your own value and how you perceive that others perceive your value, then you will impose that healing on those around you, or you will impose, this is very common, you will impose the shape, the form of sickness, of deficiency on people around you. This is the same as people who do have a similar connection to, say, teaching, and will impose ignorance on those around them. So our values and our subconscious habits will start to infiltrate and infect the healing with those particular shapes and habits that we have. Okay, so really, really important that any system of energetic development or skill-based development, if it is to become a healer, to become a doctor, to become a teacher, to become, let's insert whatever you want there, that a part of that path, right from the get-go, is the dissolution of your own habitual attachments, right? A dissolution to your own ego, and to really look for and strive for the best apart from yourself for the people that you're working with or for. Okay? Super, super important. Do not neglect this. Otherwise, in your teaching, if you're a teacher, you will cause an incredible amount of harm. You will hurt many people over the course of your teaching career. If you're a healer, you will hurt many people over the course of your healing career. Again, insert whatever the vocation is that you might have there. Okay? So get your stuff together so you're as free from yourself as possible. This will allow for you to work through a deep equanimity and goodwill that will radiate from you. That exists apart from the need to pedestalize any aspect of yourself, or the need to condense or impose any particular shape on the person you're working with that helps facilitate your own value as whatever the chosen identity might be. Okay, so not usually the first thing that we would come across when discussing healing, but one of the most important things. I've mentioned this before. I called it Gandhi 2.0. There's that saying from Gandhi, be the change that you wish to see in the world. If you are working with people, you have to see the change that you wish to be in the world. So you have to allow for those shapes to be in use in the environment. You have to allow for that to be a potential in the environment. Okay? Okay, so now looking at some of the specifics of healing. Let's start with working the mental body, which is what Bardon starts with here, which is looking at essentially hypnosis. In this case, instead of a self-hypnosis or auto-suggestion, it would be for somebody else. Oops, I just tapped the mic there. Apologies for making excess noise. Maybe that'll make a difference. Anyway, so hypnosis for others or autosuggestion, where you are influencing the subconscious of the person. And through that influence in the mental plane, you then, of course, will have residual influence through the astral body and through that mechanism into the physical body. Now, Bardon makes a clear point that the work that you do on the mental plane is how you help to heal or alleviate maladies of the mind, right? Issues which may have their causation in the mind, in the mental plane. If you want to affect the astral plane or work with healing the astral body, you would work through the astral plane, same vitally, physically. And that the only bridging mechanism is through the matrices. Now, I think anyone who's done a fair bit of practice will have come to the conclusion that everything is connected to everything else. Nothing exists in a vacuum, including space, right? Nothing exists in a vacuum. So because everything is connected to everything else, there's always residual effects and there's always bridging mechanisms that are occurring. However, if we want to work with this stuff in a more pronounced way, we want to consciously use those bridging mechanisms. We want to be very aware of those bridging mechanisms and use them. If we're not working consciously and of course openly with the forces at play, then we're doing one thing, right, and sort of guessing at the results or hoping for the results. The more precisely we can, once again, in an open way, work with everything. Hello there. What's that? Hanging out? Little bit of puppy love. Hey. All right. Get out of here, dude. All right. He's hanging out under the table and he's gone. Okay, so the more precisely we can perceive what we're working with, we can perceive the different substrates of mind, emotion, body. We can perceive the actual blockages at play. We can perceive the connections. We can perceive the way that one trauma has built on another in different planes through those connections. We can perceive the identity that's involved in it. We can start to see the causational web that has facilitated this quagmire of sick in a person. So that is, we could look at this whole thing that we just mentioned here from the perspective of what do you see, what can you perceive? And this isn't merely perception, through the senses. This is perception through the tangible energetics as well. So you can feel into the stagnancies of the mind. You can feel into the astral stagnancies. You can feel into the physical stagnancies. You can observe the spiritual and karmic stagnancies. And you can start to see how all this stuff has wound its way and threaded its way together. Okay? Then it comes to how you end up working with that. And so we mentioned working the mental only through essentially like a faith type of healing or hypnosis type of effect. And this can be profoundly powerful. Bardon sort of underplays this, but there's a lot involved in a faith type of healing in terms of the integration, the union that occurs, the unification, and the openness. These are the two factors that create such powerful effects. Is the surrender, the giving yourself over. So that is the emptying of the identity, the emptying of the habitual forms and shapes of the matrices, and how those have held in the pathologies over the years, right? So we have an emptying, that humbling, that surrendering to a higher source, a higher power that comes through and reintegrates and restructures everything. So everything comes into a more harmonious union together. This union will be in a greater relationship to harmony, to health, to form, healthy form, harmonious form, healthy and harmonious function, etc., etc. Okay, so then we start looking at the use of the substances. For example, if somebody is very, very weak, right, and you can't touch them through their own cognitive functioning, so let's say they are unconscious, there's means of loading up the vital and astral body, starting from the base and working up instead of starting at the mental and working down. You start at the vital. You, through the vital, load up the astral, and that will invigorate the mind. And I have a friend who, I believe his father was in a coma just prior to death. I believe he grabbed onto his feet, loaded him up, and it allowed his dad enough time to wake up out of the coma, and his father and his mother were able to have their final interaction through that mechanism. Now, for some people, in some cases, that type of effect can be a cause for a more full healing. In this case, it was a cause for wakefulness, for a type of closure, I suppose, and then his father did return to unconsciousness a little later. Now, so that's a loading up of the vital energy. And so sometimes there are maladies that just because there isn't enough energy present, the energy is required for, other functions to try to deal with different disharmonies. So there isn't enough energy to go around, so different things will start to break down. So simply having enough vital energy, enough life force present can do wonders, right? It's a phenomenal tool. It's very, very simple, and it's a phenomenal tool. You have loading with the elements or working through the elements, right? And this can be done in contrast. So the example he gives, if someone has a fever, the contrasting element would be water to the fire of the fever. So you could load up the water element and allow that to use its own intelligence to help facilitate the alleviation of a fever. Now, just like when we are training, if you've been listening through this series of videos or podcasts from the beginning, you'll remember that we discussed closer to the beginning of this book how you build a resiliency in your personal training to the frequencies. The body has to adapt, right? The astral body has to adapt. The mind has to adapt to be able to function within these higher states of energy or these different substances. And so if we're doing a healing, we want to be careful that we're not loading somebody up, especially if they are weak, beyond their capacity to handle and through flow those energies. We don't want to burn anything out, right? It takes energy for the tissue to sustain energy. So this is where it can be useful to do more frequent sessions with people and not load them up too much. So you're just sort of allowing the subconscious of the body, for the body itself to adapt to the healing, and for the subconscious to recognize that, oh, you know what? This is, I actually feel okay. And through more regular sessions, you get a subconscious identity that starts to arise that you are actually the type of person who does feel okay, who does feel better. And there can be a lot of value in these particular types of explorations. Now, downsides of multiple types of treatments and needing a lot of them is that it's more time, it's more money, and that's something that, not everybody has. So then we look at, okay, well, We can harmonize the elements. This is a way of working healing. We can look at causation, the Akasha. We have to be careful that we're not stepping on karmic toes here. So be aware of that. You can load with light. The more subtle the energy source, the more pervasive it will be, the deeper it will go, the more causationally it can work, because it's a more refined substance, so it permeates more deeply. Okay, now when we're working with healing, because there can be effects of the healing that seem negative, that's why one of the reasons we don't want to do too much at once. So if you have an identity that is built up about your own efficacy as a healer, sometimes you can do more harm than good, because you can do so much, say, cleansing work or whatever, that the body's response to it, its purging response, its re-harmonizing and rebalancing response as it's ridding itself of the toxins, whatever it might be, sometimes that can take more energy than we actually have. So this is where these things can get a little more complicated, in the sense of including prolonged timing effects in the work that you're doing. So it's not all at once, but you load into the information of the lighter substance that you're working with, or within the paradigm of deity yoga, evocation, etc., where you hand the healing over to a deity of healing. If you're doing this more yourself, then to include some parameters that the energy that you're working with only works to the extent within the person's ability to handle it. And so then if you're going to be causing through the healing a healing response that requires a lot of energy, that you also include in the healing the extra energy that might be needed in a delayed time frame, or in very direct relationship to the healing session and to the accumulation of health, etc. As that time goes on, that the excess energy can be used as needed for the healing. And so this can be loaded into the field of a person. It can be loaded into an amulet which you give a person. It can be loaded into the body of a person in a way that it has a time release type of effect. So these are things we want to consider, so we don't do too much too fast, right? To rid yourself of all of the disharmony within can be utter chaos as things are trying to swing back into harmony. So we need to be very, very aware of this, right? Any pride that a healer takes in super intense healing responses needs to be looked at. These are things that healers will use to pedestalize the identity on, to lean the identity on. I'm such a good healer. I worked with somebody once, they had all this crazy purging. Okay, well, how long did it take for them to reharmonize, right? How long until things were stable? So this is where the release function, when you're releasing these cohesions of sickness, right? These identities and cohesions of sickness at layer after layer, it's a little at a time, it's being released off, and it's in a dose that is manageable by the individual. The deeper in the hole somebody is, the less they typically can handle physiologically. The amount of stress induced by the healing process is monumental. And so it's not just, I need to get stronger. It's the amount of energy consumed because of the healing that's taking place, right? And so that is its own type of exercise. Treat it the same way that you would treat, going to the gym, that you would treat any type of stress. Okay, then there's the we could say like the support type of role as well. So there's the healing specifically, what's actually happening in there. Then there's the supporting role of, okay, the stress that's coming out, can you help alleviate that stress of the healing? So a little bit more energy, right? Helping to harmonize the emotional and psychological imbalances that will arise as a result of the stress of the healing response. These are just a few small examples. There's the physical support of good nutrition, good sleep, right? Good thinking, a good feeling, right? Healthy, harmonious thinking, feeling, actions, practices, rest, all of this stuff that's involved. So we want to be able to consider as many variables as possible, right? The community that person might need to talk out, vent out their stress, how they might do that through words, if they don't have enough energy to do it through exercise. There's different sort of platforms or foundations that can be laid to make this easier. Healing is a very in-depth process. There's a lot that goes on. So if you're working with the elements, you're working with the electric and magnetic fluid, yeah, you can do phenomenal things, create phenomenal change and really potent healing effects. Sometimes though, when an identity has settled into, has adopted the mental, astral, and physical components of sickness, when it has more energy, when it feels a little more capable, it doesn't know what to do with itself, right? The identity, the entity doesn't know what to do with itself. And this can be another cause for stress. So what does a healthy person, what does this healthy person, if they feel good, what are avenues of through flow for higher function when they're feeling okay? And this is another important thing that is part of the energy work if you're doing it that way, or if you don't have that side of the skill set where you're helping with that through path and integrative functions and through flow functions of expression. But it's something that you would help to rewire or to wire in through the counseling side of things verbally to help give the mind a shape of what a healthy version of that human might do. So that when that energy is present, instead of freaking out, what am I going to do? There's some type of pathway that's been paved in the beginning for this slightly healthier person to start acting out that better health. So this includes all the good habits of health. It also includes expression of that through to the world around you, to other people. This could be through mediums like art and music, writing, etc. This could be through anything else, right? It could be through, starting a little bit of gardening, or whatever it is that might pique your interest, okay? So there's so much that can be said about this topic because there's so many variables. Some sicknesses seem to be karmically induced in a sense that they're part of this incarnation in terms of our own ability to move forward, right? That they are one of the causational impetuses for the evolution of the spirit in this incarnation and form. So because of that, they seem to keep popping up. Now you could look at this and go, oh, well, it's just not all the variables have actually been found, and maybe that's true. But there does seem to be some very, very common traits of condensed chaos through different types of illness when it comes to people who've been on the path for a long time. So perhaps it is issues with how that path is being walked, but there's also the collapsing of karma as you are raising in frequency, and how all that work that you do pressurizes the karma to start expressing itself more immediately and collapsing itself into the present moment. So we want to be aware of this so that we can really work through in a healthier way, and you'll start to find means of doing that. Of course, not giving up that, oh, this is just karma, but if something crosses your path that might be helpful, incorporate it. And if it's alleviates 1% of that condition or whatever, great, right? So just things to be aware of. Cause of illness, looking into the Akasha, finding the causal relationship to various pathology. This is a really, really interesting type of rabbit hole that we can explore. We want to be cognizant that we don't get too attached to this, that we don't get too attached to ourselves through this rabbit hole. Many, many people who hop onto the spiritual path for one reason or another start going down this rabbit hole of self-healing, and there's a hell of a lot of identity and pride that gets spun into our problems, essentially. Oh, I had blah 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 when I was a kid, blah blah blah, and I had this memory and that, and all this correlation starts to present itself, and this recognition of how and why you became who and what you are. And this is very, very easy to attach to. All of that stuff that comes up, it's observed, right? It's a part of whatever that moment is, but we don't want to take any pride in it. This will slow us down quite drastically. And because we don't necessarily, beyond what is necessary for the integrative processes, continue to feed those prides, feed that sense of victimhood or having overcome something or this or that or the other thing. These are all identity cohesions. So as the identity starts to dissolve and evolve and come into resonance with higher function, and higher beings and dimension and universal sort of cosmic connection, a lot of that stuff, the importance starts to wane, and through that a lot of the healing can start to occur, because those identity cohesions which are holding those pathologies in place start to dissolve. So the spiritual evolution has a very, very direct connection to the opening up of the health, or the cleansing of these different types of cohesions and pathologies. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you have good health, you are highly developed spiritually. It also doesn't mean that if you have terrible health, you are highly developed spiritually, right? These, again, are absolutely not so relevant. So, because everyone's working from a different place. At every end of every spectrum, right? So just be aware of all this. Okay? All right, that should be enough to get folks started with the healing. If you're going to be feeling into other people, this is so much more than imagining what's going on. The imagination is not just, it is in relation to the energy that's in front of you. Just like you reach out, you pick up a book, you put it down, you feel the book, right? You feel that tangibility. You have all the intricacy of how your fingers work, how they feel the edges, how it feels the weight of the book, how it feels that enough is within the hand, that the book won't drop, etc. There's a lot of precision inside that. There's a lot of tangible awareness. And the same is applied to the energy. So if you're working the energy with people, you need to feel precisely what is going on there, where the cohesions are. You start dissolving those cohesions, bringing the person into a stronger resonance with the energy you might be working with, or the harmony and function you might be exploring. And you work with precision. with openness, with awareness, and with goodwill, without attachment or pride or essentially the identity-based need for that person to change. That clinging of that identity-based need will stagnate the process, stagnate the healing process, condense it, and make it that much harder to work with. Okay? So when it comes to healing, you look at yourself, you do a lot of work on yourself, a lot of work on your relationship to what it means to heal, right? And then you develop the relationships to the energy and skills necessary to begin to carry that out. This is done at its best through relationship, not through imposition, right? A relationship that is free of your own identity, right? Not through imposition on the person you might be working with, right? This is not for you to create value, your own relationship to your own value, or to start pedestalizing your own sense of self-worth. This is a relationship. The will to do good is paramount, okay? All right, I think that's everything for this little section. Thank you for your time. If you're interested in training, I have a workshop coming up this June 2025 here in British Columbia, Canada. So this is a Hermetic Alchemy retreat, a spiritual attunement retreat, levels 1 and 2. You can check the details out on the website. And I offer private coaching, private lessons as well. These sessions are 2 hours in length, so you can contact me if you're interested in that. And lastly, there are courses available on the website as well in Tai Chi, as well as in Qigong, meditation, and Hermetic Alchemy, along with the Q&A video reference library we call the Zenden. So you can check that all out on the website. And once again, thanks for your time. Hope you're enjoying these. See you next time. Bye. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts Podcast. We're going to continue today with our exploration of Franz Bardon's initiation into Hermetics, Step 9, and we will be exploring the spiritualizing of the astral body. This is an introduction to that, as well as a little bit of a chat about astral travel. So, let's begin with astral travel. How does it differentiate from a mental travel or mental wandering? Well, the astral body has a very, very strong connection to the physical body. So when you start trying to work with astral traveling, taking more than the mental wandering, but an aspect of the astral body or the physical along with you, you can run into some massive issues and some potential health hazards. So it's something that I don't really have much interest in and haven't explored much because the ramifications can be quite steep. Now, in more advanced aspects of the astral work, you can do it with portions of the body, and that is something that someday I will explore a little more. So I don't have too much to say on astral travel, other than if you're going to do it, be careful, because you are taking a big chunk of what makes you alive out of the body. What gives us our health, our robustness, all of this, all of that is the integration, the unification of the bodies. And as we start to pull them apart, you run the risk of not being able to put them back together again, right? You become Humpty Dumpty. So be aware of that, and make sure if you're going to explore the astral traveling type of work that you really have solid health, good vitality, good equanimity. Now, value outside of the obvious things you could get from that work, which Bardon mentions in the book, you can learn about this flux or this shift from being linked and then having the astral body sort of pulled apart, right, from the physical, and then put back together. And this can help you reintegrate very thoroughly, okay? Because you get to practice that mechanism of separating, right, and then reunifying. And there can be value just in that one little piece alone. If you have sustained some deep mental and psychological, well, that would be mental, psychological and emotional trauma, you might have experienced a type of astral fracture, where an aspect of the astral body, a good chunk of it, has essentially like broken off the physical body, and it doesn't want to exist in the place of the physical body. And so can kind of hang out kind of other locations beyond the body in the field. And I've noticed this in people who've had some very, very severe trauma. Think of like the worst things that you could imagine happening to somebody and make it worse. That type of trauma. And even worse than that. Now, basically, when that astral body, that aspect of the astral body gets removed, there's a massive amount of vitality and potential integration and health that gets pulled out along with it. So over the years, the health will start to deteriorate. And when I have worked with people in these states, as we identify that part of them that's existing outside of themselves and offer it an opportunity to reintegrate into the body, so that there can be that integration and the energy can actually start working. That flow can start working. There's often an incredible amount of resistance. That part of, from both sides, right? That part of the astral body doesn't want to re-enter the physical body. That is where the pain exists. Doesn't want to re-enter the mind. That is where the pain exists. Okay, but also the person who's consciously identifying as the person, you know, they don't like the feeling as that energy starts to be reintroduced either, because now they have to experience the body with that type of energy in it. They have to experience the pain of those blockages in the body, and the pain of those blockages in the emotions, and the pain of those blockages in the mind. Because if you have gotten used, say for decades, let's say for 20 years, you have had this astral fracture, and the energy is depleted more and more and more, you might find a state of total peace with the trauma of your past, merely because there isn't enough energy to pressurize those traumas. Right? So that's the type of person who will always be just bleeding the energy off. And as soon as more energy is put into the system, oh, it's so uncomfortable, I'm so tight, it's this, it's that, I don't like it. So because of that, when this reintegration starts to happen, the person doesn't want it. And it's a bit of a slap in the face to that astral aspect of yourself, to that part of your astral body that's, you know, it's like a snail's eye, you know. It starts to check out where it's going, and if you touch it, it retracts, right? If it gets sort of pushed down or revoked, it retracts, right? It's usually a quite innocent aspect of ourselves. So we want to be aware of this, so that if we are going to engage in these reintegration processes, we don't deny these very innocent, childlike parts of ourselves that may have sustained a type of, or have existed, been suspended in a type of arrested development. That we don't deny them, and that we don't shut them down as soon as that potential opening and reintegration starts to occur. Okay, so if you have spent some time, even just a little bit, working with very, very small amounts of freeing the astral body up a little bit in a way that could lead to astral travel, just that first stage can have tremendous amounts of benefit, because you'll be able to open things up and put things back together. And I think for most folks, that's where most of the value is going to come from. Now, for more advanced practitioners, you can explore the depths of that work more. However, the astral fracture side of things is something to be noted, okay? You never want to make assumptions for people. Whatever you experience in your clair senses, it's best to keep that more ask questions, right, than to just go, hey, did this happen to you? It's not very thoughtful. It doesn't really help anybody, right? And it usually creates a contraction of the matrices and inhibits healing, because when you're reintegrating, there also has to be an openness so that reintegration can occur. You have to be open so that unity in a higher, in a more refined state can actually filter its way through. Okay, and then close down after that to internalize the reintegration, and then open again and keep evolving it and close down again. This is the constant process of opening, unifying with a higher power or a more refined aspect from an alchemical standpoint. And then once that unification has embedded itself, you've embodied that unification more fully and completely, embody speech, mind, all the layers, then we open up again and the process continues. Sovereignty, unity, sovereignty, unity, sovereignty, unity. You have to be free so that you can unify with something more refined. And this is just how the process tends to work. So now we want to get into the spiritualizing of the astral body. And this is sort of a prerequisite for more advanced deity yoga. Okay, now the way that Bardon has orchestrated this is with the fire element to the quality of omnipotence, the air element to the quality of omniscience or all-knowingness. Omnipotence is essentially all-powerful, all-knowingness or all-wisdom, divine wisdom. The water element, he offers immortality as the quality to the water element, and to the earth element, in this stage, he offers omnipresence, which is to be everywhere, all present, right, in all locale simultaneously. So the way that this is worked on is individually, right? With each, you meditate on each aspect individually, and eventually you reach a stage with each aspect that you can meditate on all of them at once. Now, the big pitfall with this type of practice is the cultivation of a crazy supercharged ego. So we want to be aware of that. How we navigate this is, instead of using the ego's understanding itself, the 3D part of us, that understanding of what each of these qualities means, we go into the Akasha, we find the depths of equanimity, of Akashic equanimity, and from that place, from a relationship with light, we invite the quality through the Akasha. And this essentially purifies the habitual meaning we might have with those words out of it. Now, why these qualities? When most of us are looking at what we might conceive of as divine character or deity, it might be one of these qualities that we associate with it. And there's an interesting thing that Bardon does here, where in the next chapter, in step 10, he looks at another quality as well, and then things reorganize. But we want to explore all of these different qualities. And so when we spiritualize the astral body, this is actually baking these relationships into the astral body. to the point where you are this quality. Now, the reason we want to go through the Akasha to these qualities, through the depths of equanimity, is because if we aren't, then we get this weird, distorted, refracted idea of, say, the quality of omnipotence. If we're trying to use the understanding of the mind, the emotions, the body from this space, from that location, to understand omnipotence, and to then meditate on that course relationship with omnipotence and embody that, it's not hard to see how someone could develop a super hyper inflated ego. Go, oh, I'm all powerful. Who? Me, this guy. That's something we want to be hyper aware of. Okay? This is not to inflate your ego. This is not to enliven that coarse aspect of ourselves. Remembering that this is on the back of a lot of work, this practice. It's on the back, comes, after a deep exploration of Akasha, a deep exploration of the workings of the mind, of the qualities, the attributes of mind, right? There's a lot of work that goes in prior to this. So really, really give yourself the opportunity to cultivate a strong relationship with the Akasha, a strong relationship with light, and then you can start, and with say, balancing and harmonizing the elements in their astral nature, in their mental nature, as we've discussed before, so that when you begin spiritualizing the astral body, it's done from a place of purity, right? That's really, really important. So what's interesting is, as you say, start to bring omnipotence and resonate that through the astral body, you start to notice some very interesting shifts that occur. When you start to bring omniscience, this divine wisdom, through the astral body starts to resonate with and almost become full of these qualities. It comes into harmony, into resonance with these qualities. And any part of you that is not in resonance with this starts to fade away. So you start to develop a relationship through the Akasha with a wisdom, a knowing that exists beyond any immediacy of the moment, right? A relationship to the spark of action that is omnipotence, that is the power of the creative and destructive functions, right? And this works out cosmically. That starts to bake into your astral body. When it comes to astral, say, immortality, how could we describe this? The freedom from the elements, the freedom from the influence of the elements on an astral standpoint, that starts to infiltrate. You start to become free from the beckonings of the elements. And this is what really allows for that immortality to start to permeate, right? You look at, it's a very interesting one to explore, because immortality can be looked at from the astral standpoint, the immortality of the astral body, almost in direct contrast to the dissolution into nibbana. Some might even look at it like a necessary return path for the work of the bodhisattva, who denies the totally freeing themselves, stepping off into nibbana, and returns as a returner to help aid in the freedom of the rest of the beings that are in these lower planes. So lots of exploration there. Now you might go, okay, well, is immortality, like, why is this to the water element? This tends to be because the water element is associated with the soul, with the astral side of things. This denser part of the energy body, or the bodies that you can play with. So you could also go, okay, well, immortality, maybe that should be to the earth element, right? What is more permanent than that which has been brought, into form completely, right? That's pretty substantial. But then once, and this is again could be why the water element, once you start relinquishing time, that which was the earth element becomes the water element, right? And immortality has to do with the relinquishment of time, or the existence through time, where time is no longer a what's the word we could use? A factor. There's a word. It starts with a C. A factor that is, well, it's not contributing, but essentially controlled by time, right? The earth element, when you relinquish time, the earth element flows like water. And you can look at that even from a physical standpoint. If we were to put a time-lapse camera on the mountains, right, even though they seem still, over enough time, the earth element, that which is form, becomes less formful. If you relinquish space on the water element, right, what happens, right? It turns into the air element, right? And then on the other side of that, you have the fire element in this standpoint, or we could say like almost a plasmic type of relationship, where essentially that which is form breaks apart into subform, and through that you have this relationship to essentially the ether and this plasmic type of relationship from a formful standpoint. So that's where you might look at immortality being actually too light in the fire element, because what is more permanent than that which is beneath all of the permanence, right? So there's a lot to explore there. Now, the omnipresence. This is one that usually breaks people's mind a little bit, so you want to be careful with how you introduce this. And this is, of course, to be present in all things, through all things, of all things, right? And this can be looked at as to the earth element. So that's how Bardon explores it. You can also look at this as to the akasha. I mean, that's kind of obvious, to be all penetrating and all permeating and all encompassing, right? The omnipresence is sort of the reason you could look at it as to the akasha is because to be omnipotent, to be all powerful, to be at one with all things in the relationship to the creative and destructive cycles, to that potent moment, right? That aspect, that relationship. What's necessary? The all part, the omni part. To be omniscient, right? There's a connection to all things. To be all loving, which we get into in the next chapter, or again from a deityistic standpoint, or even immortal, there is a relation to the all of things. So the omnipresence is sort of the crux of that. It's the bedrock of all of the omnis. In my experience with these and many other practices. Now, if you want to work these, you go into the depths of meditation. And I do not suggest working with the spiritualizing of the astral body until one has spent a lot of time in very, very deep, clean meditation, right? This is something that you might do in a retreat setting, okay? And by that I mean there is no distraction. All day, every day, you are in the depths of meditation, right? There's no talking, there's no one else that you're communicating with in any way, you're not typing or texting or working. There is nothing that is stimulating your sense of self other than all of your habits. And so you go into the depths of retreat, you spend some days finding that purity, that equanimity, that Akashic depth. And from that point, you would then work with the opportunity of inviting these divine qualities, these qualities of deity, into the astral body, one at a time, until you become that quality. Not you, the you that you think is you. From the other side of that, right? We've already dissolved, and we're working from a much cleaner, clearer, empty space. This is absolutely crucial for the spiritualization of the astral body. And I'm going to point out again, the ramifications of not working from that point of clarity is substantial when it comes to the cultivation of a superinflated sense of self and ego. And if you're not sure whether or not you're working from that space, you're probably not, right? There's some pretty clear recognition as you keep working through this stuff, right? One of the pitfalls of, trying to bite off practices that we might not have the foundation for is this hyperinflation of the ego as like the most, almost like the least destructive, the health ramifications, the relationship ramifications can be pretty brutal. So we just want to be aware of that. How much, if there's any pride in the spiritualization of the astral body, if there's any pride whatsoever, any me, I'm the boss, I'm the man, then more akasha, more equanimity, more harmonizing the elements, more deep concentration, meditation, where you're so absorbed in the minute nature of the subtleties of what's going on, you can refine all the qualities of mind, and you can go, oh, there's the the water element attaching to that quality. There's how the mind, that cohesion to this quality of divinity I'm trying to bring through. There's the ego getting involved. Be aware of these things, and really be honest with yourself, because you can do a lot of damage to other people when you've developed energetic skills. When you start developing this stuff, impurities of mind, impurities in the astral body, ill will towards other people in any respect. If you've developed some energy skills, you can hurt people. And this can happen in very subtle ways. So really, really get your stuff together. Then you start spiritualizing the astral body. And what I've noticed as you start to really build these qualities into the astral body is the freedom. Again, the omni side of things, this all aspect. The freedom starts to really build in. And you start to develop a strong relationship with sovereignty, and we might call it like a spiritual confidence starts to develop. This confidence is based on competence, and the competence has its foundation in equanimity and non-self, right? Not because you have a skill in this or that, right? But your ability to release. There's a competence in this. A competence in the non-attachment to and constant re-edification and reformulation of this thing that we call us. Okay? So, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in training, I have a retreat I am teaching coming up in June 2025 here in Canada, Powell River, British Columbia. This will be a 16-day retreat, a level 1 and 2 spiritual attunement. That's the crux of the training is through the transmission. There's a bunch of fun stuff that we're going to be exploring in that. If you're interested, you can see details in the description. My teaching is for students on the path, who have goodwill towards themselves, humanity, and are really working at exploring the depths of spiritual dissolution, working towards the dissolution of self, okay? The non-dualistic exploration. Now, there's many dualistic practices that can be beneficial on this path, but if you're wanting to sort of just learn how to, manipulate people and that kind of stuff, I'm not the teacher for you. There's many out there who are happy to oblige on that front. My interest is in the spiritual exploration when I'm teaching, especially those who are on that path. There's also training on the website, pre-recorded courses in Tai Chi and Qigong, Hermetic Alchemy, meditation. So you can check those out. There's a Zenden there, which is a Q&A video reference library. I'll answer any questions you have via video. Just send me a note, and as soon as I have service and I'm able to record a good answer for you, I will get that up for you. And lastly, private coaching, private lessons. These are done on an interview basis, one-on-ones, okay? I do not teach everybody, so we want to make sure we are a good fit. And once that has been established, then we can organize private instruction. These lessons are 2 hours in length, and they are almost always worked through with depths of transmission. So once again, you can contact me if you're interested in that stuff as well. All right, I think that's everything for this one. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast. We'll be continuing today with our lecture series on Franz Bardon's Initiation into Hermetics, Step 9. And we'll be looking today at the use of talismans, amulets, pentacles, and gemstones, etc., and the value in this. Okay, now Bardon differentiates 4 classes of these objects you might wear. And the first is the talisman. Second is the pentacle. Third is the amulet. And the fourth one that he mentions is the use of magical gemstones, etc. So in his description of talismans, and you don't necessarily have to organize things according to these, this is just a way of defining a few differentiations. So he refers to a talisman as something that is more psychological in terms of auto-suggestion, and we could look at it like a trigger or a cue that helps bring a type of organization of the faith component in terms of confidence or whatever the quality is that we might want to have more of, right? Or that we want to find greater resonance with. And this is more so done through self-hypnosis and a reminder of, and that's what the amulet's purpose serves in that sense, or the talisman's purpose serves in that context. With the what's the next one? The pentacle. With the pentacle, this is looking at the specifics of the actual shape, the makeup, right? What are the component parts, the constituent elements of that pentacle, right? And what are you loading it with? What substances? What are the corresponding elements involved? And so this is very, very useful because you end up working with stacking. What's the substance, right, that the amulet or the pentacle is made of? Is it in congruence with the intention you're going to load into it? Is it in congruence with the substance that you're going to load into it? Is the shape in congruence with everything we've mentioned so far. And all of those factors start to come together. And this has a lot of potency and sort of ups the ante. So it's not just self-hypnosis or triggers, etc. There's a lot of value in this. The next would be the amulets, and this one is classified as scriptures that you might have written down or have had written down for you. So from spiritual traditions or religious traditions. This could also, according to Bardon's classifications, include substance like your fluids, condensers, liquids, solid, etc., as well as plant matter that might have different effects associated with it, or that you may have actually tuned into yourself, and wearing an amulet made of these. So these are, I find quite different within this classification. But anyway, the last one is the use of gemstones, and gemstones have particular properties. Now, if you are relying on the prescribed properties of a stone, you want to go through the work up to this point a lot more and develop your spirit senses, your energetic sense potentials, all your clairsenses. You want to build your relationship with energy more. You want to build your relationship with the subtleties of the mental, astral, and vital bodies, so that you can start to use your own awareness and your own perceptions of the potency and the meaning, the qualities of a stone that you touch. So when you touch, say, hematite, there's a very, very immediate effect where the energy gets sucked in and drops down, right? This, you don't have to read that hematite is grounding or try to memorize that. You just touch the stone, and you feel its effects, right? You feel the effects of the carnelian. You feel these effects, you know them, you experience them, right? Instead of relying on the recorded knowledge of others. Okay, now why is this important? Well, everyone has a slightly different relationship to everything. Okay, so people will have different relationships to the effects of different stones based off your own constitutional makeup, the habits of your mind and your emotional systems, your bodily systems. So this is an individual relationship. Now, there might be pretty common effects that most people will feel from a stone, but you might not have all of those. You might have some more individual effects. The same way you build a relationship with people, and you might have different types of relationships with different people, right? It's individual, it's unique. You don't have the same relationship with every person you meet. Every relationship, friendship, etc. is new, it's different, it's fresh, it has its own personality. So there is a unique personality of the individual with the stone or with the material as well. Okay, so you can use the innate properties of the stone as they pertain to you and your relationship to enhance what it is that you're going to load into the stone. Okay, so these are the classifications, and to be totally honest, I don't really pay too much attention to those classifications. You want to look at the material of the object. What effect does it have on you? You want to look at the symbology of the object. What effect does it have? What is it connected to? Okay, the materials of what you might include in the object, right? Say the plant matter, the fluid condensers, the scriptures, etc. And you want to look at all of this. And the smallest component will be, of course, a type of self-hypnosis. But as we dive into this, you'll really come to understand the difference between just a hypnosis type of effect, a self-hypnosis type of effect, and the full bore of working with all the different types of energies, etc. Okay, so the first way of loading a stone that Bardon mentions here is, he describes it as the mere use of intention and imagination. Okay, this is what most people who are engaged with spiritual practices will be using, because there's not really any substance that's been cultivated in terms of vital energy or astral substance, elemental substances, etc., etc. What we're using is the best of what we have at that particular stage of development. So most people who are into spiritual arts will understand have some relationship to intention, to imagination. And this is why Bardon uses the word, or at least the translation uses the word mere. Okay, because while it can be potentially potent, this would depend very, very, very drastically on how much time has someone spent really practicing the precision of their intention, really practicing the precision of their imaginative faculties, right? Now, if you've been cultivating these qualities for decades, you'll get a decent effect. If you haven't, and you sort of do it, a little bit, you're not fully engrossed in it, you don't have the buildup of the accumulated concentration practice, etc., then it'll be a little less, and it'll really fall into that category of self-hypnosis and triggers, etc. Okay? Triggers in the sense that you train yourself to recognize that this thing has a certain meaning, and then that acts as a form of self-hypnosis. Okay, so I'm just going to pull out my list here so we can go through each of these. The second way of loading is by means of a set time limit and the accumulation of vital energy. Of course, there is a type of intention there as well. So building up vast amounts of vital energy and loading that into the amulet, or I'm just going to use amulet as the whole. I'm going to use it as a word to describe all of the classifications. We'll just put it into the word amulet for the purposes of the rest of this talk, okay? So building up a bunch of vital energy, loading it into the amulet, more. Okay, if you want there to be a specific duration where that effect no longer, the effect that you add to the vital energy, right? The vital energy is the fuel, okay? And then the purpose that fuel will carry out is the wish impregnation or the intention. Okay, and if you want that to be within a certain time limit, have an end time, then you also add that into the intention. And this becomes more and more clear as you work on your meditation practices. Okay, the relationship with time is as a substance. Okay, and you start to feel into this and have very tangible relationships with the substance of time, okay, and how that spans. Now, prior to loading with a substance, or really in anything, you typically would want to clean the object, the amulet, right? And the simplest way to do this is in water, and then you envision the cleansing, the sucking out, using the magnetic nature of the water element to suck out any impurities. And you would do this as its own meditation with all of your concentration, your surrender, goodwill. Open that up, cleanse it. Running water, if there's like a freshwater stream, river that you can submerge the amulet in, this is also quite beneficial as well because it's actually moving. Okay, of course you want to make sure you don't lose your amulet, have it flow down the river and never come back. So you're going to have to tie it down in one way or another, you know, little baskets or like a fishing net, something like that, that you tie to a tree or whatever. That can be pretty useful. You know, twist up the end of the net, throw a rubber band over it, or tie twine or whatever around it, and that should keep things so that you can gather your amulets again, your stones, etc. So, loading a lot of vital energy in until you can really feel the presence of that energy. Okay, again, why there's a lot of value in cultivating the extent, quality, quantity of your capacity to work with and feel different substrates of energy. So you'll feel when that, or see if you're clairvoyant, you'll perceive the accumulation of the vital energy into that amulet. And so you do this, you really load it. Now you can also include in the intention, right, the carrying forth, the objective of that amulet, to have the strength of the vital energy and the projected intent to get stronger every day, moment by moment. Now, with all of this stuff, the more regularly you practice the loading of the amulet, the more powerful it will become, and the more clear its directed intent will be. The suggestions here are to use one amulet for one purpose. Okay, and there's a lot of value in this because it's very precise, it's clear, and you're not confusing the qualities of that particular loading, right? You're not deviating the attention too much. For all of this, you need to have developed the ability to focus on multiple objects at a time. You have to have the capacity to have multiple objects of meditation and hold those simultaneously. It's very important. Okay, so vital energy, there's a lot you can do with it, all right? And a lot of fun you can have with this. The third here way of loading is through elementals, elementaries, beings, etc. So go back through your text there or through your practices, review how it is you would create an elemental or an elementary. And if you've done evocation work, right, which is in more advanced training, then you can, or deity yoga, you can also load these qualities, these beings, etc., into the amulet. Now, if you're working with elementaries and elementals, that is, you go through that process and then you use your spirit senses and the precision of your attention to load those in. If you're working with deity yoga, you really want to be, I would say, cognizant of not trying in your mind to trap that being in there. You're working with beings who are far more advanced, far more omnipotent, omniscient, all-loving, omnipresent, immortal, essentially, than you are. So if we're engaging with these beings as if we have dominion over them, it's pretty childish. However, you can use your relationship that you've cultivated with that deity you may have worked with. Use that relationship and essentially you ask for the help of that consciousness to imbue an energy into the object and imbue a relationship to that consciousness, that deity, into the object. You're not trapping it in. If you want to work with that type of mentality, the type of beings that you'll be working with are going to be a lot different. Okay, so something to be aware of. Okay, look at the quality of your relationship with what it is that you're loading into the amulet. Okay, the next one here is individual or traditional rituals. These can be, if they're traditional, they might be a very long duration of build-up where you engage in a ritual every day for multiple years. There's movements involved, right? Everything that's been discussed about personal rituals or traditional rituals becomes a part of this. The power in traditional rituals is that the entirety of the tradition is however many decades or centuries or millennia back that ritual has existed. There's an accumulation of very strong relationship to the ritual and to vast stores of energy and information that ritual is connected to. And so you end up tapping into that. Okay, now these can be fast, these can take quite a long time. Personal rituals, you create them yourself. And so then you use the power of that ritual, the accumulated power of that ritual, to accumulate an effect in the amulet. And the recommended suggestion here is 462 loadings or days worth of working that ritual into the amulet. So then when you pick up that amulet, it is loaded with that ritual, and because of the amount of time spent, any novelty associated with the ritual, with the intention, all the stuff that might be more formful, the mind intention, any astral relationships, etc. Because of the use of the ritual over time, things start to settle into the Akasha more naturally. So you end up, through the use of the ritual, creating a relationship to the Akasha of the purpose of that ritual. And so you end up wearing an amulet or having an amulet that is embedded with the ritual in its causal form to reticulate out. Okay? So lots of value in that one. It's a fun one. It can take a lot of time. There's, of course, ways that don't require that much time. But, depending on your skill, that might be a really valuable one to put some effort into. Okay? Any practice that you do over long periods of time will find its way into the Akasha as you keep releasing more and more deeply into the ritual, where you become the ritual. There's no differentiation between object and observer. And once you hit this point, right, and you build that non-duality, the Akasha opens up, that equanimity, that stillness really starts to come about naturally. And this is how most practices will touch into the Akasha, is through accumulated repetition. Okay, so you can look at that in relation to the amulet specifically and that practice here. There's a lot in this one. I often suggest that people load the end of their practice into an amulet, or at least into a gesture, and then you get to pick up the accumulated efforts of your practice every time you begin anew the next day or the next practice session. So amulets can serve as a wonderful accelerant to tapping into what it is you want to work with. Instead of needing to spend 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours building your relationship with whatever frequency or quality you want to work with, you can speed up that process. You touch the amulet that you've loaded with the accumulated experience, the accumulated energy, intention, consciousness, etc. And boom, you're off to the races. Instead of walking every day up the mountain, you get to be teleported to that frequency. And the value there is, it's crazy, because then your access to that becomes deeply imprinted, and the speed with which you can you can find resonance build so fast that it can become a part of you and a part of your easy access awareness that much more quickly, and will permeate your being in a really nice way. Okay, magical formulas, mantras, tantras, etc. This would be like Kabbalistic word magic, any types of chanting, etc. There's other components that are involved with this, with visualizations and colors and shapes, etc. But there's a lot of value in this. You can then essentially be casting the relationship of that mantra, that word magic, as a means of resonating with the source of that particular expression, right? The word is not the word in the physical, in its mundane sense, in terms of how we just speak on a day-to-day basis. The word becomes something that is a reflection, an expression of its source, as a correspondence that is direct. And this is where you want to get to with your expressions of word magic, tantra, mantra, textual type things as well, where even the written word is direct correspondence. And this is done through skill and through cultivation. This is like the manner in which scrolls are written, in which the sacred texts from a more true spiritual standpoint are written, where it is not the intellectual representation only. It's connected very, very directly to the source of that. And that is where people will read something or participate in a mantra or practice, and will find that that taps them very, very directly into the experience. However, usually for that to happen, you have to actually have the relationship or the transmission, the abhisheka of that state to the mantra, or to that word magic or practice. And then over time, those merge. However, if it is imbued enough, right, then you have some really interesting stuff. So you end up loading that source relationship of text, of mantra, chanting, etc., posture, whatever it might be, into the amulet. Okay, and then that amulet is something you can wear and have direct connection as something that is in the physical and unchanging, in the sense that you can be chanting a mantra, right, or sitting in a posture, but when you finish the practice, you are no longer chanting and you're no longer sitting in the posture. You're doing other stuff through your day, so you can sustain the relationship of those frequencies and the changes, the resonance with that particular thing you're working with. And you can run that through the entirety of your day and have it be bubbling in the background, with even more potency than having done the practice in the absence of wearing the practice all day. Okay, it's kind of like you could knit yourself a new sweater every. Forget it. Forget the metaphors. You get it. Okay, so accumulation of the elements, right? Really good, really, really good. Have an amulet for the earth element, an amulet for the water element, an amulet for the air element, an amulet for the fire element, an amulet for the akasha. Separate. Really build your relationship with each element every time you practice that element. Tap into that amulet, wear it after the practice, load the amulet up, right? And you will build, for reasons mentioned just a few minutes ago, a very strong relationship to that element, and a very quick ability to tap it and go. Okay, instead of needing to build up your relationship with the, say, the fire element, every time you practice, you have the accumulated relationship of all your work and time spent with the fire element, boom, loaded into that amulet. So then all the ways in which you might use the element, the purpose that element might be acting out via intention. And, you know, with all of this, you have it getting stronger day by day, it having a time where it dissolves, etc. Lots and lots of fun to play with, okay? Electric and magnetic fluids, lots of power in those. They're quite strong because the electric and magnetic fluid are the constituent components within and behind each of the elements. Okay, from Akasha to electric and magnetic, magnetic, as they pertain to earth, as they pertain to water, as they pertain to air, as they pertain to fire, right? Always working. So lots of power in the electric and magnetic fluid. Play with it, right? Explore, and, you know, be safe with it, okay? The accumulation of light, if you are at a stage where you are able to tap into more spiritual light, okay, then you accumulate that, you load it in. Now, we want to remember that light, essentially you can keep loading light in it, that you don't sort of run out of space. When you're loading a bunch of vital energy in, you might notice at a point that it can feel like there's no more space left in the amulet for the vital energy. You keep loading, and then the field of that amulet starts to grow and grow, and you're loading the amulet and also the relationship of the energy through the field. When you're doing it with light, you can essentially keep loading it and keep loading it and keep loading it. It doesn't seem to take up space. Now you can load it in with, of course, the effect of that radiative field and quality, and keep loading that quality into the field and the amulet. But that density, we might say, of light can keep becoming brighter and brighter and brighter. And that's sort of the metric of the quantity of it. Is the more light there is, the brighter, the stronger that light becomes. And Bardon suggests this for more spiritual type of purposes, in terms of spiritual intuition, these types of things, guidance, etc. Now, what you can do with light is many fold, okay? But you'd start simple and experience the difference between a light substance and, say, vital energy, and the elements, and the different types of effects can have, the subtlety with which light can express its effects and its relationships in terms of the closeness to the Akasha, to cause, right? If it's a more coarse energy, it's a lot easier to perceive in the physical world and the energies. When it's working with light and that depth of Akasha that's necessary to work with light, the subtleties and the subtle way in which that intention can unfold and express is very fascinating to observe. Okay, so you can load that into an amulet and bang, you have that there. Really good for working with more spiritual purposes. Okay. Electromagnetic spheres / volts. Okay, so electromagnetic volts, these are strong. And when you have explored these a little bit, there's a lot of power in them. Because of this, there's warnings that Bardon employs about altering karma, etc., and being very developed if you're going to use very strong changing potentials or very strong tools to alter your reality and the reality of those around you. So loading the electric fluid, then you load the magnetic fluid around it, and by squeezing the magnetic fluid around the accumulated electric fluid in the center, you end up pressurizing that electric capacity, right? And bang, you have some strong stuff there. It's really, really powerful, especially as you start tuning into it more and more effectively, and your relationship with the substances you're working with are more and more effective. So explore that one, and just be cognizant, be aware, be awake to the possibilities of what you're working with, and carry on from there. Okay, we want to move forwards with as little ignorance as possible. Okay, the last one in this particular section is using sexual magic, essentially, for the loading of the amulets. And he doesn't talk about this too much here. The reason for that is that most modern tantra is an excuse for self-gratification, whether that's with a partner or alone. The actual use of sexual energy when it comes to spiritual stuff, it goes through alchemy, right? You're transforming that energy. It's not a mere movement of sexual energy from one place in the body to another, right? Or from one place in the body to outside the body, right? There's a transformation of that energy. And in order to do that, you need to engage with that energy from a place of deep equanimity and akasha, right? The depth of the equanimity allows you to engage with the source of that energy and not with the habitualized sexual meaning of that energy. So that's very, very important. And the reason for Bardon not speaking too much about the use of the sexual energy is that you can do a lot of harm if you aren't in a place of spiritual, you might say, connection and serenity. The lowest aspect of ourselves can get acted out, and this is where you get all kinds of sex cults and weird shit that starts to arise around the tantric type teachings. However, if you have a partner who is as developed as you, then you can work these processes more safely, and you can then load into the amulet empowered by the union and the energy of two people that are connecting in that way and seeing each other as divinity moving through themselves and their own divinity moving through that person. It's a much different game. All of that energy that's built up through that practice then can get loaded into an amulet, and that's incredibly powerful. Most people who want to explore that will tend to do it a little more frivolously, as like a fun thing. Hey, let's use some energy and fun little sexy times, and that's fine if you want. You just want to be clear about what you're working with. If you're going to use vital energy to play around, then do it with the acknowledgement of your partner. You're both playing with energy, having some fun, playing with sensation. But for any higher purposes, you want to really have a clear intention. And I find a type of respect and sacredness towards the nature of what you're doing. Okay, we all like to think that we are better than the admonitions of humility, of devotion, of reverence, of sacredness. I can just use it for blah, blah, blah. And to a degree, yes, but you really want to look at the potential harm you can cause as well. So if you've developed enough, you might find that the use of this becomes more precise in terms of the sacred aspect involved in using or employing sexual magic type of practices. Okay, there's a lot more to be said about that, but we'll keep her there for now. The last thing mentioned in this step 9 is electromagnetic volts released or flung, as he describes it, into the Akasha. And so this is that much more potent than the pure electric magnetic volt, because the place you're releasing it into is into the causal world itself, into the Akasha, right? Into that which is beneath and behind and through all form. So because of this, the use of the Akasha principle, you want to be very, very, very aware of what it is that you are purposing the electromagnetic volt for. And the suggestion in the book here is to use it for spiritual purposes, for the purest of spiritual purposes. And the use case, he kind of describes it that if the situation, only use it if the situation is so bad that you need to use this as a tool. Now, you know, that could be as a protective mechanism. I find this to be also quite powerful. Now, we talked about being able to observe and hold multiple points of meditation, multiple objects of meditation, multiple points of focus, so that we can have a relationship to the, in this case, electric fluid, a relationship to the magnetic fluid, a relationship to the effect of both of those working, and a relationship to the Akasha, plus the intention, etc. This all has to be very, very clear, precise, no wandering of the mind. So all of these can load. And when you drop or fling the electromagnetic volt into the Akasha, you want to make sure it goes into the Akasha. So your relationship with the Akasha must be developed enough that you can observe the casting of that volt into the Akasha. And when you immediately sever the connection, it's done through the Akasha. Okay, and this is something that you'll develop over time. Now, can you work on all of these different potentials at the beginning? Yeah, you can absolutely start exploring them. However, we want to make sure that we allow for the evolution of our own skill to evolve, right? We want our own evolution to continue. And then you revisit this as you're constantly evolving and your understanding of each of these processes of loading an amulet. The last one is less a loading so much as a dropping into the Akasha, though you could do that in relation to an amulet. But we want to make sure that we allow for what it means to enact these loadings, to evolve with our own evolution. Okay, and that is one of the things that often doesn't happen. We will, in the beginning, develop a relationship to what it means to do a particular practice, right? And very often that is just, it gets locked in that. However, when we revisit everything that we're working on, as we keep evolving, you find that there are just numerous, almost innumerable lessons that can be learned and innumerable growth that can be applied to every practice right from the very, very beginning. Okay, so that's it for chapter 9. The last step is step 10, so we will dive into that in the upcoming episodes here. If you're interested in training, I have a retreat coming up looking at Hermetic alchemy. This is a spiritual attunement retreat. We work through direct transmission, Abhisheka, and this is a 16-day retreat. So you're welcome to check the website for details on that. It's certainly not for everybody. Typically those who come have a fair bit of experience, and we really go quite deep. So you want to make sure that you have a strong connection to your spiritual growth if you're planning on coming to this particular retreat and most of the work that I do. The website has online training courses in Tai Chi, as well as a course in Qigong, Hermetic alchemy, and meditation. And those can be worked together, grafted together in a really, really nice way. And lastly, I do offer private lessons, private coaching and teaching. And these are 2-hour sessions. And if you're interested in that, you can shoot an email to the website there. All right, hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for your time. See you next time. Bye.